Hi everyone, this is Mindy Eggen and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I am going to talk about two different ways that you can add highlights to your colored image. So I will be coloring this image with alcohol markers and then I will show you how you can add highlights in there. This video is also a part of a video hop with Honeybee Stamps. I'm going to have the next person in the hop linked down below in my video description, so please leave comments along the way. The more comments you leave, the better your chances are at winning the giveaway. The image that I'm going to be using for my card project is called Sending Christmas Joy, and I absolutely love this image. I'll tell you why in just a minute. The first thing I'm going to do is stamp this onto Neenah Solar White 80-pound white cardstock, and I'm stamping it in the Honeybee Stamps Intense Black ink. This is an alcohol marker friendly ink. I am going to stamp it twice just to make sure all of my lines are crisp. And then a key thing here is I'm going to leave that in my Misty stamping tool. I want to make sure that this ink is nice and dry before I start coloring, so I am bringing in a Ranger heat tool. I'm going to quickly just go over this and dry it. Don't apply too much heat because you could warp your paper slightly, which can get in the way when you start coloring. The markers that I'm going to be using today are the Altenew alcohol markers. So I've had some of these sets in my collection for a while, but I've never actually used them. I am going to list at the top of the screen what the set is once I get to it, but the individual colors that I'm using, I will have listed over on my blog, which will be also linked down below in the video description. Now, you're going to notice that one side has a gray line around the edge, the other side does not. The one with the gray line around the edge is a bullet tip, and then the other side is the brush tip. I'm going to be using the brush end for my coloring. I do really like the fact that Altenew provides a bullet tip on the edge or on the end of their alcohol markers. Most come with a chisel tip, which I end up wanting to switch out. So I really do like the fact that they already come with a brush and a bullet nib. The collection of markers I'm using today from Altenew, this first set with the greens is the Firewood Garden Collection. Again, I will have those individual colors listed over on my blog, which is linked down below. The reason I'm starting with my leaves first is I had previously colored in this image, just trying out various color combinations, testing out where my shadows would be, and also testing out these markers because I haven't used them in a long time. And I just thought it was easier starting with the leaves so that way I could figure out exactly where they are. Because there is one area where the flowers are bunched up that it gets a little tricky to figure out what the leaves are and what the flowers are. So when I'm coloring the leaves and actually even in the flowers, whenever something is overlapping another object, you are going to have a shadow area. So that's just kind of a key point to remember whenever you're coloring is that look at your image, figure out if it's overlapping something, and then where those 2 points meet, that is where your shadow is going to be. In most cases with the leaves, right next to the flower and where it's overlapping the leaf is where you are going to put that darkest color. When I first started learning to color with alcohol markers, I had learned with a 3 color combination set, and that's just kind of what I've carried through the years. And I really do like having the dark color, the mid-tone, and then my light area, which is my highlight area. You can get away with only using 2 markers, but in my personal opinion, I really do like having the 3 different colors if I want to have kind of that drastic contrast. So I want to talk about the markers a little bit because I believe this is new to my channel. I don't think I've used these before in a video, and I will say I do enjoy them. I have, I think maybe like 5 or 6 different sets. And in their collection, of course, with Altenew, they are geared towards a lot of flowers. So when you buy their collections, you're going to notice that it matches a lot of their color line or their ink line. And it also is, in my opinion, kind of geared towards flowers. So I really do find that helpful. Now I am moving on to coloring in the flowers. I decided to go with a classic red color for Christmas. This one I believe I listed as the Island Garden set. This color combination has 4 different shades for this particular marker set or for the particular reds in this set. And I am going to use all 4 of them in most cases. One other thing that I like to do when I'm coloring is I take all my caps off and I place them in the order that I want to color them. So if there's 4 colors, I'm going to go from darkest to lightest. I always put them back, or I try to always put them back in that order. That way, I don't have to sit and look at the top of my marker all the time to make sure I'm grabbing the right one. Now, there are times that I didn't put them back in order or I put them back in the wrong order. And I do have to look at the top of the marker to make sure I'm grabbing the right one. So again, these markers do color really nice. As I mentioned earlier, they have a bullet tip, which is a really small, fine tip. And then they have the brush marker, which is a little bit longer. It's more of a paintbrush type of look to it. And I am glad that Altenew does that because most alcohol markers come with a chisel tip. And I have never yet found a time I needed a chisel tip. So I do like that. As far as if they're refillable, I don't think they are, don't quote me on that. I didn't really read up on the specifics. When I was reaching for these, I mainly was looking at the colors because, like I said, they're kind of geared towards flowers, and I really did enjoy their colors. Some of them are, to me, very unique color combinations. So they color like any other alcohol marker that I've colored before. They color very nice. I did not find that I got any bleeding out of this, and you're going to notice that in this sped up portion of the coloring that I go over some of those images twice because I am using Neenah 80 pound. It is not a super smooth cardstock. So the ink tends to soak into the paper a little bit faster than if I was using something like Express It cardstock. I am not familiar with the ink flow system in the marker itself, like how it is put together, but I did find I enjoyed coloring with these markers. So if you are interested, you can check them out. Maybe just grab one set if you want to try it out and see what you think, and you can have your own opinion about them. This is just all my personal opinion. Now, as far as the image, so I believe Kelly Taylor designed this set, and she's a phenomenal artist and a phenomenal colorist. And what I really love about this image, and I feel like she really portrays this in her images because she colors so much, is the artist drawn lines. I use those artist drawn lines as a guide. So, for instance, the lines in the actual petals themselves, I use them as a guide on where to put my darkest shade. And I love that about this image. It's not too much open space where I feel like I really have to work at blending, but they're also not super tiny. So I really appreciate this set. Kelly's got some other beautiful stamp sets. I actually ordered a few more sets because I just loved coloring up this image. And as I stated earlier in the video, when it comes to adding your shadows, whenever something is overlapping, that overlap is going to cast a shadow. So, for instance, these petals are in the back, which means that the center of the flower and the flower petals that are in the front are going to have that shadow casting on those back petals. So, it's okay if you don't have, if you're using a four marker color combination, it's okay if you don't get to that last marker because they are going to be just a little bit darker unless you want it to have that extra highlight in there. To me, it is totally optional and you can just color however you want. It doesn't have to be super realistic. I don't think there are any real rules when it comes to coloring. It's however you interpret it. The only real rules that I follow is just where things overlap. That's really the only thing that I pay attention to when I'm coming to it. Or if something is maybe turned to the side, I kind of think about where the light source is at that point. But other than that, I just kind of color however I feel at the moment. So, as I'm going through this, I want to apologize if I sound a little stuffy, as my son gave me his cold. So, I am pretty stuffed up at the moment, trying to get through this voiceover without coughing. So, excuse me if I sound a little stuffy or I just sound a little bit off. Now, I'm going to finish coloring in these last flowers here. And as you can see, I've had things sped up, but I'm going to finish this off. I'm going to play a little bit of music to finish it off, and then I'm going to catch you at the end where we start talking about adding the highlights in. Now my image is complete and we can start working on highlights. So if you feel that you lost some of your highlight or you just want things to pop a little bit more, there's two different ways that I like to use, either a colorless blender or a white colored pencil. Now the colorless blender that I'm using today is from Olo because I think my Copic one is dried out. And all I'm going to do is go over that lightest area where my highlights are, and I'm going to just quickly brush over it. With a colorless blender, it really just it's not a blender per se. It removes ink or pushes ink. So you don't want to sit on your cardstock for too long with this. It is a really great way to kind of move some of that ink where you want your highlight. It's going to pick up some of that color. And I do find it's a really nice way to add those highlights or make them pop just a little bit more. But it is something you want to practice with first before you come to your final project. Being that this has a brush tip, I can stand my marker up straight and really get into some of those nooks and crannies. Now, the second way that you can add your highlights back in if you feel you lost them is using a colored pencil. This is a Faber-Castell white colored pencil. I'm laying it kind of on its side and I'm going very, very light-handed over this, barely touching it. The thing with the colored pencil is that it can kind of show the texture of the cardstock, which is why I don't use it too much and I don't want to push down too hard because I really don't want to show the texture of the cardstock. I like the smooth look of all of my coloring, but it is a nice way to add highlights back in. And if you sharpen your pencil to a nice fine point, you can really get into those small areas. I went through and did that for all of my flowers. And then I'm going to take my panel back over to my Misty and I'm going to re-stamp the image because I want to make my black outline pop a little bit more. Of course, this is pretty scary. I'm going to test it first. I placed actually the transparency that comes with the stamp set. I placed that over my stamped image or my colored image. And I'm going to stamp my image down to make sure everything lines up because that would really make me cry if I stamped it crooked. So now that I know that it works, I can go ahead, ink up my image once again with the intense black ink and stamp that down. And all that does is just make all of those black lines pop out a little bit more. Not a step that you absolutely have to have, but it is something that I like to do. So after I have that stamped down, I am going to use the coordinating die and line it up over the image, hold that down with a low tack tape and run that through my die cut machine. I also went ahead and cut another one from some heavyweight cardstock, and I'm going to attach this with some liquid glue. And all this does, it is adding stability behind my image. Sometimes I'll add some foam tape after the fact, and sometimes I don't. I just like the extra thickness of this. Now, in this particular stamp set, there is a postage stamp and a coordinating die, but I wanted my postage to have kind of the bigger edges to it. So I am using the Lovely Layers Party Frames, I think I said it was called. So I die cut that from white cardstock. And there was also another frame in there with the notched corners. You can kind of see my flower sitting on top of it. I'll explain that in a second. But I went ahead and added my postage frame to some latte cardstock that I also used one of those party frames with. So it's going to give it a little bit detail. So I added that with foam tape. Now you may notice that I have just a rectangle. And the reason for that is I had that notched frame. And then when I went to attach it, uh, it was crooked and I ripped my cardstock. So here I just die cut a frame. And that is using that rectangle frame that is in the Sending Christmas Joy stamp set. I added foam tape behind that. Then I got smart, added liquid glue to the foam tape so I had that little bit of wiggle room to make sure that I was straight. I'm also going to add some thin foam tape behind my image and I'm going to pop that up as well onto the front of my card. So some of these foam tapes are not super thick, but it's adding just enough dimension to lift it up from my card. For sentiment, I am using this Merry Christmas, which is off of that Sending Christmas Joy stamp set. I have some black cardstock that I'm prepping with an anti-static powder tool. I'm going to ink up the Merry Christmas in a white pigment ink because I plan on heat embossing it with white embossing powder. And this is my favorite way to do that. I find I just get the best result when I stamp with white pigment ink. This is a very scripty font, so you don't want to push down very hard, just ever so gently. And that is why I stamped it 3 times. That way I didn't have to put a lot of pressure on it. Now I'm going to sprinkle on that white embossing powder, tap off any excess. And then after my heat tool is nice and warmed up, I can come in and melt my embossing powder. Once that has cooled off, I'm going to take a Swiffer cloth and just buff over that to get rid of any of that excess powder. And then there is a coordinating die for this that I lined up and ran through my die cut machine to trim out the sentiment. I also die cut that 2 more times from that black cardstock, and I'm going to layer it together with the liquid glue. This is a pretty, like I said, scripty and fine font. So layering it up with the cardstock is a lot easier than trying to trim out foam squares for it. And then I'll add that to the front of my card with my liquid glue. I contemplated adding some embellishments, but I actually really love the simplicity of this. So I hope you enjoyed those tips about 2 different ways of adding highlights to your colored images. I will have all of my supplies linked down below in the video description and over on my blog. And be sure to hop along and check out the rest of the video hop with honeybee stamps. Thank you all very much for joining me today, and I'll see you again soon with another video.